Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth panel of 2023 with Adventurely. My name is Jalen Vasquez. I am the director of Freelancers Hub. We are a free co-working space here in Brooklyn, New York, operated by the Freelancers Union, partnered by the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment in New York City. We offer various programming, both virtual and in person, for freelancers to help them develop their skills and bring their business to the next level. Freelancers Union also helps freelancers obtain affordable insurance. We have various different programs, as well as pushing advocacy to help independent workers nationwide. And be sure to check out all of our resources at freelancersunion.org or freelancershub.nyc for all of our upcoming events like this. Today, we will be talking about being a responsible digital nomad with wonderful guest speakers based out of Cabo Verde in Africa. And if you don't know where Cabo Verde is, it's an archipelago island country in the central Atlantic Ocean, just west of Senegal. But before we do bring on and introduce our various panelists, I would like to introduce the brains of this series, the CEO and founder of Adventurely, Mita Carriman.
Thank you, Jalen. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Mita Carriman. I'm the CEO and founder of Adventurely. Adventurely is a travel club for digital nomads and remote workers. And we partnered with Freelancers Union, where Jalen works, along with Freelancers Hub and some other awesome brands, which include Nomads Giving Back, Insured Nomads, Fora, to bring together New York City Nomad Village. So I want to tell you a little bit about this project called New York City Nomad Village. So New York City Nomad Village is a virtual village of all of our brands working together to support responsible approaches to digital nomadism worldwide. Next slide, please. So why are we exploring conversations around responsible digital nomadism at a New York City Nomad Village? And why virtually from New York? Well, the reason why is because there's currently about 35 million digital nomads around the world. Digital nomads meaning people who work remotely and slow travel outside of their home city. So out of these 35 million digital nomads worldwide, there are numerous statistics that show that the majority of digital nomads are actually coming from the United States. And then within the United States, unsurprisingly, New York has the largest amount of digital nomads that are leaving New York and going and traveling abroad. And as you could imagine, of course, California is a close second. But as a New Yorker, I'm a born and bred New Yorker. And I've seen New York change in so many ways since I was a child to where it is now. And New York will welcome anyone to come. But, I've seen ways as a New Yorker where sometimes things just didn't intermingle the right way, or there were missed opportunities for an integration of some of the ways that the communities were coming together. And so as I have personally traveled abroad for the past 6 years, full time around the world, to I think I'm at about 18 countries now as a full-time digital nomad, I'm seeing that there's awesome opportunities for commingling of different cultures and communities and countries where you have digital nomads going to these new communities abroad, even where I am right now in Mexico City. And there's tremendous economic opportunity for a lot of these communities that are welcoming digital nomads. But sometimes there are just unintentional things that happen where the commingling and the co-integration just is not as harmonious as it could be. And as maybe you've seen in some of news about digital nomadism, that there is sometimes, just realistically speaking, a pushback on digital nomadism. So we believe that there can be so many win-win situations for digital nomadism. And we believe that the best time to help digital nomads know how to make that situation a win-win is if they get the support and the knowledge and the information on how to do that before they leave US shores. So Freelancers Union has, I think, over like 300 to 500,000 members worldwide, and all of our brands have so many community members. So with the virtual panel series, we're able to spread the message about responsible nomadism in a much quicker way. Next slide, please. So the framework that we have from New York City Nomad Village, which eventually has crafted in this, It stems from something that's already been established in travel, which are established principles on responsible travel in general, whether you're a nomad or not. So this was something that existed way before digital nomadism was a thing, just principles on how travelers in general can be responsible. So we have to start there first. What are the 3 established principles of responsible travel that were established before nomadism and eventually New York City nomadism came about, New York City Nomad Village came about? The first is being socially, economically, and environmentally aware of when you travel. The second is understanding how your actions can impact a destination. And the third is striving to ensure that this impact is a positive one. So at Eventually, we took these established principles of responsible travel and we created a published framework on responsible digital nomadism travel. Next slide, please. So these are our principles on what responsible nomadism means to us at Eventually today. And the reason why we are very specific in saying today is that we're keeping an open mind that as digital nomadism continues to grow and continues to become more popular, it's inevitable that there's going to be more issues or concerns to consider. So we're keeping this as a living, breathing set of principles that we're open to amending and growing and making better as the nomadism movement grows. So these are our framework principles. Number 1 is making sure that the local economy is boosted. Having intentional shopping decisions for locally owned businesses and tour and restaurant providers in your nomadic destination can add so many wonderful economic benefits to the local community. So when you're there, you're in Croatia, you're in West Africa, you're in Mexico, wherever you are, going to a locally owned designer, locally owned restaurant, locally owned tour provider is so crucial to supporting responsible nomadism. Second is preservation, respect for local heritage, language, and environment. Making sure that local jobs are preserved and grown for locals and not for nomads. So an issue that's been coming up in certain nomadic destinations are that certain locals are voicing just the concern that they're having to learn the languages of the nomads versus the nomads learning the languages of the locals. Now, of course, as a nomad, when you get to a new destination that you've never been to before, you've never taken classes before, there's going to be a steep learning curve. There are wonderful free tools available like Duolingo. It's not an endorsement. Like Duolingo is a very popular one for free where you can learn a few very basic phrases like hello, thank you, or apologies, I'm learning the language. If you learn those 3 as a start, which can probably take a total of maybe 15 minutes, that's a great way to start interacting in terms of language. And then it's super important, of course, that because we're digital nomadism, by the definition of our traveler profile, our work is remote. So we should not be looking for jobs within the local community, since that's not the visa situation that we're there on, whether we're on a tourist visa as a nomad or a nomad visa as a nomad. The third thing, and this is a really, really important thing, is making sure that local housing doesn't become scarce or overpriced. Mindfulness around nomad subletting. So this is something that we've seen happen very often at Eventually, where nomads by nature, they might want to spend 1 to 6 months in a nomadic destination and they get a great apartment. And of course, nobody wants to lose a great apartment. Nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, there's some nomads who decide to sublet. There's nothing wrong with subletting, but they decide to hype up the price on the sublet. They inflate the price. That's something that does happen, unfortunately. And that's not fair to the local communities because that has an effect on their availability for housing in the market as locals. The next that we have in our principles is intentionally integrating with locals and building friendships with locals, not staying within the nomad expat bubble. In today's conversation, we're going to have our nomad speaker, Lionel Oglesby, is actually a friend of mine. Of course, that was my first entry into making a friendship within Cabo Verde, because he's a nomad from New York who had spent some time in Cabo Verde some years ago. So it's logical that sometimes your point of entry in making friendships into a foreign destination as a nomad is going to be another nomad. But I think that there has to be an intentionality to step outside of that once you become settled. This is not an official principle. This is something for me personally, that, a lot of people will stay in a nomadic destination for a month. And I like to use the Instagram factor. If I've left a nomadic destination after a month personally, and there isn't one local that I've connected with on Instagram and we're now Instagram friends, if that hasn't happened, I really personally check myself to see if I have tried at least somewhat to step outside of my nomad bubble. The next thing that we have in our principles is participating in local volunteer work, charitable donations, or skills share transfer when possible. So a problem that I'm seeing across a lot of destinations is that sometimes there are nomads who want to participate in volunteer work, give back to the community, donations, all of those wonderful things, but there is sometimes a lack of access to the information on how to find that. So conversations like what we're having today, where we get to hear from a local like Joli, who's going to be speaking later today and share some ideas and options around that, is great in the conversation. Next that we have in our principles of responsible nomadism is remembering that we're guests and being mindful of creating a paradigm where locals start to feel like they are outsiders to their own communities. There are so many nomadic destinations that are very happy to have digital nomads and they welcome us with open arms. But there are some that also say, you know, hey, we're starting to feel like we don't belong in our own neighborhoods, in our own cities with all these nomads. So just making sure that when you're going to stores and restaurants that you are smiling, you are making eye contact with the locals, you are engaging in conversation. And even if you can't speak the language of the destination that you're in, there is one universal thing you can do that everyone understands, and that is a smile. Everyone understands what a smile is. So just being mindful of that. And then the last thing that we have in our framework for responsible nomadism that we've created at Adventurely is compliance with local laws. So again, this is from us at Adventurely. This is going to be a working, living, breathing document of principles. And yeah, we're excited to get into the conversation. So before we bring on our nomadic speaker, who's going to be talking with Jalen at Freelancers Union, we're going to bring on Andrew Jernigan from Insured Nomads. Insured Nomads has partnered with us for this event series, and Andrew's going to share a little bit about Insured Nomads and how they can help you on your journey as a digital nomad. So we'd like to welcome Andrew on stage, and I'm going to head backstage.
It is great to be here with you all today. I'm Andrew Jernigan, CEO of Insured Nomads and a nomad myself, nomad dad, raising kids around the world. And one of the key things about responsible nomadism is making sure you're not leaving local ecosystems with hospital bills. If something happens and you've got to be medevaced to a hospital out of the country, you don't want to have to be doing a GoFundMe, calling friends, family, racking up credit card bills. That's why inexpensive travel insurance is available. And if you're doing this long term, it's not travel insurance, it's international health insurance. Well, so next slide, if you will. We've made technology available to you through insurance. And the insurance is the financing of the healthcare. But let's move on to the next slide. I'm going to touch on travel insurance, and that is three different elements here for you. That's one where if it's just travel medical, and then if you want trip cancellation, that way it pays for the flight cancellation, the resort, if you're more higher end traveler, things like that. But if you're living the international lifestyle long term, you're going to want health insurance. That can cover you in your home country, even in many cases. So these are very affordable compared to U.S. health plans, and very flexible. You can have inpatient only. That way, if you're admitted to a hospital, that's covered. There are different deductible amounts. That way, it reduces your cost. And these are very cost-effective, robust plans. But as I referenced, paired with technology, and that's where you have an instant response button, that red button that you see in the middle of the screen at the bottom. to speak 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to emergency responders, security personnel, and getting you out of there. But it includes mental health therapy sessions in Portuguese, even if you're going there because you speak, going to Cabo Frio or Cabo Verde because you speak Portuguese. So mental health therapy sessions in languages all around the world, airport lounge access with all of our plans at varying levels, and cultural information alerts when there's danger. Your policy ID card is right there with your boarding pass in your Apple Wallet, your Google Wallet. And so I'm going to keep this short because not many people want to hear about insurance. We want to hear about what's happening on island life. So stay tuned. If you have to join later, this video is going to be available to watch completely later on, and you'll see the channels to do that. Connect with us on social media. It's Insured Nomads, and that'll be in the links below. If you are a travel advisor with Fora or others, partner with us so that you can earn through referrals. And there are different links, contacts on the screen. Thank you very much. And we look forward to protecting you as you live and work around the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that. Definitely check out Insured Nomads. And thank you for sponsoring these live sessions with us. So I'm going to invite our freelance guest speaker, Mr. Lionel Oglesby, an equity and inclusion executive. How's it going, Lionel? How are you today? And I think you're on mute.
Yes, I am. To make sure. Jalen, so great to have to be here with you all. Thank you so much for having me, and I am really excited to talk about Cabo Verde. And I just wanted to also thank Mita for inviting me to share about my experiences and just the work that I do and how I'm able to marry the work I do with my interest for travel. And so, yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. So just for our viewers, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from originally? I know Mita already mentioned that you're from New York, but just go a little bit more into that and what work you do within diversity and equity inclusion.
Yeah. So once again, my name is Lionel Oglesby. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, went to school here. I work for a national law firm, public interest law firm. We have offices in different states. And so a lot of my work around diversity, equity, and inclusion is about driving what our goals are, what we want representation to look like in our work externally, but also internally. And a lot of it is really sort of focused around change management.
Cool. And what wanted you to get into that originally? Because I feel like we've only heard of the position of diversity and equity inclusion more recently within the last 5 to 10 years, or just more so now, if anything, just the importance of diversity and representation.
You know, that's a great question. You know, largely, it had always been something that I'd been interested in. Starting from college, a lot of my coursework was around sociology, focus on race, class, and ethnicity, experiences of others. And then outside of that, the agencies that I've been with, you know, I was always one of the people that would often mention about what does representation look like? What is our board composition like? What are the voices of our clients? And are they being heard? Just sort of how are we making informed decisions if it's sort of being limited to just a very small universe that doesn't represent the people that we're working on behalf of. And honestly, the work that I started to do started around 2016, 2017. So I'd like to sort of toot my own horn and say that I've been doing this work before it became popular, because the idea is that we're all humans navigating a really complicated world with a variety of experiences. And I think it's much more than a moniker of DEI. It's a way of life. It's a framework. It's something that I think we all should aspire to.
Yeah, I do believe it is more of a mindset shift nowadays as well, that it does take a lot of practice to kind of practice what you preach and just to hear the voice of either disenfranchised and just actually have proper representation, whether it's in our offices or just our day-to-day. Can you go a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like as a diversity and inclusion executive?
So a big part of it is the team that I have. we work on different ideas of work we want to do. So we have different areas, whether it's about staff retention. So a lot of it is going to be like data analytics, like looking at numbers, looking and identifying trends, making proposals around like, this is an issue that we want to work around and we want to build capacity for, and then getting buy-in. That's like a very practical level around DEI. There's also the aspect of DEI that's around just competency and formal training, like having workshops and discussions around best practices, around sort of being able to identify and challenge bias in the workplace. What does bystander intervention look like? What does it mean to be culturally competent in the workspace? Like being intentional with your language, like all those things. The idea is like, we're not here to bludgeon anyone and make you feel bad about yourself, but there is something to be said about making sure that we just have a basic awareness. Plus, on a very practical level, DEI, in many ways, it's a beneficial thing because it saves you from litigation if you're just looking at it from a business practice.
That's actually a very good point that I feel like a lot of people don't think about. And if someone wanted to get into the field of DEI, is there a specific education that they need to have, or different specific training, or just maybe if it's just working with specific companies or either volunteer works or nonprofits, things like that? Is there a specific road to take, or is it just a wide journey of different options?
I think, you know, my journey to this work was very organic. I know that now it's very much a field that people aspire to be in. I would say that generally, if you have an academic background in sociology, organizational psychology, leadership development, all those things actually lend well to the idea of being able to have like the framework to look at it. If you're working more on the end of like change management solely, like having knowledge around data and like knowing how to manipulate numbers, look at numbers and create stories around it, all those things are going to be really useful. But I think on a really fundamental level, there's a level of diplomacy that is very useful. And interest and curiosity around people. And I think one of the biggest skills that people often forget about is empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like especially nowadays, people lose empathy, compassion. It's, I don't want to say a cold corporate world that we live in, that people just kind of forget anything of that. And they just think of the numbers, the bottom line, and it shouldn't be that at the end of the day. You should think of just qualitative as well instead of just the quantitative. But I want to shift a little bit. So you do work full time, but you are freelancing part time as a consultant. What made you want to freelance part time? Because I know a lot of our members, that's essentially how they start freelancing. They have a full time job and they either moonlight or have a gig on the side. And sometimes that leads them to leaving their full time jobs to work full time freelance.
A big part of it's about relationships, you know? I think sometimes having relationships, networking, being intentional about the relationships you foster and having a big network generally will lead to people having curiosity around like this new thing called DEI. I'm like, I'm not familiar with it. How can you dispel some of these rumors or myths I have around it? And being able to have like earnest conversations with people will, one, spark their interest. And then I think at that moment, you can kind of sort of transition to pitch mode where it's like, I can give you an overview, but I think actually you're going to probably need someone to help to facilitate this conversation. And you can start with trainings and then it's like word of mouth. But I think a lot of it, again, is going to go back to relationships. And then outside of that, you can build out capacity. People are often looking for people to do this work, especially in the last 3 years. So making sure you have a website, making sure that you have sort of a body of information, that you have testimonials, all those things will speak volumes about your work. And then as we all know, in the age of social media, your online presence, if you choose to use it for that, is really important. So like availing yourself of LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok and whatever else will also serve you building your brand.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The relationships is key to the freelance business. That's, I would say, always the biggest issues is for our members is, especially starting out, is just finding new clients, and they never realize how powerful relationships can be, where it can make or break your business. When you made that transition to first starting freelance, was it hard for you to time manage between having the day job and freelance part-time? I do the same myself, having a full-time job and having side freelance gigs, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. Do you do anything specific for time management or anything like that?
You know, in many ways, I'm very old school, like pen to paper, like using like old school daily planners, writing things out. I forgot the brand that used to do Trapper Keepers, but they used to have this really that you could mark things out. Like, I need that level of organization. I need to be able to see things. And then I also need to be realistic about my time. The beauty of having a full-time position with the ability to freelance, which may not be the experience of everyone else, is that I do have a chance to decide what I want my workload to look like. I can moderate or sort of change if needed, depending on particularly hard times. And then I think sometimes with the subject matter I'm working with, some of this is just sort of like my intellectual property. So some of the work can be transferable. So it's about making sure that you're working really in a really smart way, being realistic with like what your demands are. And then also for me, like leaning into the idea that my goal is always going to be to the primary job that I keep. Like, that's what allows me to do this work in a different way. So I think those are going to all be considerations.
Cool.
And project management. If you have a background in project management, even just like as a skill set, also really useful.
Awesome. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about travel and the actual digital nomad experience. So with an Instagram handle as Senior Wanderlust, I assume you travel a lot.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. I've been to about 75 or 80 countries. It's been one of those things that I've just been really fortunate and having the ability to see different parts of the world. It's been something I've made a priority. As we've all seen, like, you don't have to be like independently wealthy to have access to the world, and you can define travel however you want it to be. So whether it's going to Wisconsin or going to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, like, the world is there, and how you want to interact with it is up to you. But yeah, travel is a passion of mine. It's been a passion for a really long time.
And what made you decide to go to Cabo Verde for a digital nomad experience? Like, is there anything specific that drew you, or is just like on your bucket list, or was it recommended to you by somebody?
Actually, a couple of things. So I went to Brown University, based in Providence, Rhode Island. New England generally has like a large Lusophone community. So a lot of people from the Azores, from Portugal generally, and a lot of Cape Verde in that general area. So I befriended a lot of Cape Verdean folks while I was in Providence and in university, and like dear friends of mine are Cape Verdean. And not to sound cheesy or stereotypical, I just remember there was an opportunity I had. There was a friend in undergrad, and she wanted to make a point to bring people from New Bedford, Massachusetts, which there's a super large Cape Verdean community, to the university, sort of for like cultural immersion and access to like first generation college stuff. And I remember just really being struck by the generosity and kindness of folks, and just in many ways, it was familiar to me. So I always knew I wanted to make my way to Cape Verde. And then it had always been on my list since like 18 or 20. And then we had a pandemic. And, you know, the reality is many people made promises to themselves that, like, unfortunately, they weren't able to keep because maybe they just didn't wake up. And not to take a morbid turn, but at least for me, it gave me this moment to sort of look at it and say, like, this has always been on my bucket list. And it had worked out that I was able to take a break from work, like a sabbatical. And it was like coincided with my 40th birthday. And I was like, where do I want to go? The world's kind of locked down. And then I just said, let me go to Cape Verde. I've been saying I wanted to do it. I should just prioritize it today. So that was really the impetus.
That's awesome. I feel like just telling yourself and kind of manifesting those things to make things happen actually goes a long way than people think. just setting like personal goals, like, hey, I'm going to do this year, no questions asked. Let's make it happen. What can we do? When you first arrived, was it very difficult? Did you have housing already planned, or was it a little bit of an issue that you had to like search around for housing once you arrived, or did you stay in a hostel, things like that?
Well, I don't know if people believe in astrology. I'm a Virgo, so I'm really sort of like anal when it comes to stuff. So I had like this trip planned out down to the T, like 3 months before I started to do anything. The beauty of the pandemic, though, is it allowed me to take a step back and really introduce the idea of like flexibility and freedom, which in many ways sort of speaks to being a freelancer. So I had already identified a place I wanted to go. I had really availed myself of social media, and I started to look for contacts and looking for people in the Cape Verdean diaspora that maybe I could connect with, which is how I got connected with the Joli of Avantade, who will speak after me to talk about the amazing work she's doing there. I will tell you that my experience in Cape Verde was single-handedly changed by like connecting with her. And you know, the beauty of relationships is that you make important relationships and you're able to share those relationships with others, like I was able to share with Mita.
Cool. And what was your first impression like with the culture there? Did it meet the standards of like from what your friends described to you? Was it just so much better? Like what stuck with you when you were there?
So, I mean, there's so many unique flavors to Cape Verde. It's a nation that's comprised of roughly 10 islands. Joli will correct me if there are more. So each island sort of has its own experience, but I first started off in Santiago, so the capital city of Praia, which also serves as administrative head. So that was where I started. And I had a chance to kind of figure out the lay of the land. I lived in Brazil during university, so that was also a reason why I was drawn to like Portuguese speaking countries, and I had taken it first semester. So in that way, there was some cultural immersion there. Definitely was like a bit of a disconnect, or took me some time to get used to Cape Verdean style of Portuguese or Creole, which is like a hybrid Portuguese African language. So it took a while to figure that out, but you know, I'm pretty adventurous. So I just walked around, sort of explored different places, and I had already had my itinerary set out. And within a week, I met Joli.
That's awesome. And how well is your Portuguese now?
No, I mean, it's rusty. My Spanish is a lot better, but yeah, no, it's definitely one of those things that when I'm there, I kind of get into the natural groove of things.
Very cool. With working abroad, was it difficult for you to adjust to the time zone? Do you stick to the New York schedule of working, or do you adjust? What works best for you?
I generally try to sort of marry those things. I try to keep in mind what my New York schedule looks like. And then depending where I'm at in the world, I sort of look at it as a plus of like, ooh, I get to start my day in an intentional way, where it's like a big part of my life is physical health. So usually it's at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day. So for a lot of previous years, I was like living in Mexico City. And there's an hour time difference there. And it was just kind of like, okay, I have an extra hour to do this or stay in bed or work out a little earlier. In Cape Verde, the idea is that there's roughly a 3-hour time difference. And it was like, if my day would start at 10, it was like in the US, upon rising, I had all this time. I had about 3 or 4 hours in the bank that I could do things that felt worthwhile, like whether or not it was like exercising, a meditation practice, sort of exploring a new place, or even finding really great and unique places to call my office for the day.
Got it. And when you're around around just in Cabo Verde, was it easy to, I don't want to say fully assimilate, but to find locals to show you around? I mean, because I know you mentioned a little about Joli's company, which we will get to in a bit. I'm pretty sure she helps with Avantade tours. But was it just easy for you if you just like walked around to find some locals, get some recommendations, where to go?
It was pretty easy. I mean, Joli can also, again, talk about this a bit more, but the Cape Verdean sort of New England diaspora and connection is so strong. Like, one of the things that will strike you most about walking around Cape Verde or Cabo Verde is that you'll see people wearing like Boston Celtic jerseys, which I'm like, gives me some frustration, but they're connected to that part of the world. You'll see people wearing things like Waltham High School. It's like there's so much sort of interconnection and travel between those places that it's really strange representation. You see one of New England, but specifically of Massachusetts. So you'll meet a lot of people that like they were born in Cabo Verde. They went to Massachusetts early on, and then they go back to Cabo Verde. So there's one, access to language. A lot of people speak English fluently, and they have familiarity. I think they're also really excited to meet someone that like one knows of their country, knows where it's located, and actually has chosen to visit their country as a destination. So I definitely think I earned some points there. And then I'm really good at making friends if I need to.
Yeah, I mean, you're a very charismatic person. We met in person last year at the New York Nomad Village. So I imagine for you, it's just completely easy to just meet new friends, talk to people, and things like that. I want to briefly just ask, because I'm a little bit of a foodie, what's the food like? Is it very Portuguese heavy? Or Portuguese inspired, I should say, or is it more African based? Mix of both, fusion of both?
It's a fusion of both. There are dishes that you'll find throughout the Portuguese diaspora that sort of like use local ingredients. So like if you go to Brazil, they have this dish, which is like the national dish, feijoada, which is like, exactly, beans, smoked meat, pork, like all mixed together. In Cabo Verde, they have cachupa, which like uses white beans, and it uses similar, it's the same idea, just different ingredients. They have linguiça, which is like chorizo or linguiça in other places. So in that way, the food is very different. I think because of the makeup of Cabo Verde, which mainly it's volcanic islands, the vegetation there can be limited. So you won't have the way that you can go to just salads here in New York, you won't necessarily find that in Cabo Verde. You'll find a lot of root vegetables, a lot of seafood, because they have like the unique privilege of being surrounded by water. So lots of really good seafood, lots of meat. And then obviously vegetation is available. It can be a bit more expensive, I think, for your local Cape Verdean, but especially if you have the opportunity to have your own home or place, you can prepare the food you want to prepare. So I thought the food was really good. It was rich, really unique flavors, definitely drew somewhat on Portuguese style of cuisine, but there was also like an inevitable African fusion, especially because of the proximity to Senegal. So there's a real marrying of those cultures.
So good. I'm like really hungry right now after talking about all that. So I have a few more questions before we bring on our next panelist. But are there just a couple of highlights that you recommend for people to check out in Cabo Verde?
I would say go to as many islands as you can. I really enjoyed being in Praia, the capital city on the island of Santiago. I manage, like, in theory, the extent of the island, you can kind of like traverse it in a day round trip if you wanted to. But it was just the terrain I got to see. It was really beautiful. I got to visit intentional communities, or sort of like what people would call maroon villages historically, like groups of people that challenge like Portuguese colonization and really found a way to sort of create culture. So I got a chance to like visit some of these places and have real interactions with people. And then I went to other islands. So I went to like the island of Sal, which is salt. And it's a bit more European, and it's very touristy, but it's also beautiful in its own right, crystal clear water. I also visited, I visited about 6 or 7 islands, and they were all really unique. And they all had their own unique flavor, which really made it worthwhile. The one thing I will tell you about Cape Verde, though, is that you have to be flexible traveling there. Like if I had a plan of like, I want to go to this island next week, there possibly won't be a flight available. So unless you want to do a 15-hour boat ride, which I did against Joli's advice, and it was one of the, whatever, do it for yourself if you choose to. It was really great. I just felt like there were so many amazing people and places. I will say, actually, there's an island called Brava. And it is the island that is closest to the USA, and that is where most of Cape Verdeans in the US are from. And that was such a unique and special place. And I got a chance to stay with a friend's uncle from college. So it just made it that much more special.
Oh, that sounds really nice. All right, so this might be one of the last questions, or I guess it's like a two-part sort of last question. What would be your top, either 3 or top 2, even just your top 1 advice to give someone who wants to work remotely in Cabo Verde?
I would say that, at least in my experience, I think that depending on the amount of time you're there, whether it's an Airbnb or it's working with like local real estate agents or connecting with Joli, who can help through her company to find you accommodations. Find an accommodation that suits you. I would say if you can buy, I don't have it here, but sometimes I'll do one of those travel routers as a backup. I would say that if you have the opportunity, if you could pay additional money to upgrade whatever the in-house internet is, because depending on like the files that you're moving, I would just say that you can't always avail yourself or trust public internet. And that's true wherever you go. If you have super urgent work that is going to be dependent on you having access to adequate and strong email, that could be a worthwhile investment. I would say other things that are really important. I think your health, your general health and well-being, you are your business. So making sure that you prioritize rest, exercise, whatever that looks like for you. And that's true wherever you go. But I do think it's really important to prioritize health and well-being when you're somewhere, especially if you're there alone and you don't have community in that way, it can become a scary endeavor to be alone and sick and not knowing what that looks like. So I would just say practicing like a healthy lifestyle will be key.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. A lot of people tend to forget at the end of the day, you do need to take care of yourself, especially if you're a self-independent business owner. If you're sick, who's gonna be getting stuff done?
Exactly.
Like unless you have a small team, but usually as like a solopreneur, it's hard, and you do lose money the days you're sick, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so my final question. So pretty much the whole idea of everything of this series is just being a responsible nomad. And with your experience working directly with equity and inclusion, what would be your personal advice to any freelancers who may be heading there anytime soon or thinking about heading there soon, about supporting an equitable experience for locals welcoming digital nomads?
You know, honestly, I feel like it would be a pity to even try to repeat what Mita shared earlier with what she outlined as tenets for responsible travel, but she really hit every mark, where it's like, I know that it's a big feat for a lot of people, and people don't lead with this, but I actually think it is a way of living, whether it's like dealing with gentrifications of neighborhoods in Brooklyn or in wherever you are in the world. It's like thinking about your impact socially, thinking about your economic impact and your environmental impact, understanding how you show up in the world and the impact that that can have. Having reverence, or at the very least curiosity about people, their stories, and the history of those places. All those things are going to make a difference. Like when I spent time in Mexico City, it was one of those things that it wasn't lost on me that, like, I think the universe that became Americans in Mexico City really excluded people that called that place home for a really long time. And in the matter of a year or two, we single-handedly changed the economic terrain of that land. Like, not to sort of get on a soapbox, but what I will tell people is that, you know, at least when I was there in Mexico City, the legal daily minimum wage is $10 for a full day of work. It is $10 US.
That's nuts.
That is, I think in Industry City, there's still that one place that you can get a $40 cup of coffee. So you can imagine it's a world of extremes. And sort of being aware of your economic power is going to be one of those things that as much as you're willing to do it, I think that could be a worthwhile thing to do. And at the very least, avail yourself of knowledge. Go on Google, go to Wikipedia, go to groups and find out about cultural practices. Learn some of the words. Get outside your comfort zone. Like, don't ask why people don't speak English. Like, you're in a different place. Try to immerse yourself or be comfortable with the idea that maybe things won't cater to you. And I think the last thing finally is having some sense and awareness around yourself. You know, the idea is that the world isn't always going to be a safe place. It's not going to always be the most open place. But doing some research will be important. Like, Cape Verde is a place, Cabo Verde is a place that's really open and accepting. But, you know, depending on what your identity is, if you're a queer person, maybe you're gender non-conforming, wherever you're traveling in the world, I think you need to get a sort of a sense of like what that could potentially look like in the place you're visiting and how you'll potentially be received. Because, you know, it's no one else's responsibility but your own to really think about that stuff.
I think it's a great advice and a great way to end it. And just like at the end of the day, like in addition to everything that Mita also mentioned as well at the beginning, is at the end of the day, you're more or less a guest in their house. So try to respect their rules, their way of life. You might be a little bit uncomfortable, but also do your research as well the best you can. But yeah, I think this was a great conversation. I'm really interested to go myself now. Hopefully that might be my next vacation. We'll see. But thank you so much for taking time in your day, Lionel, to do this talk. If you're in New York again, you're always welcome here at Freelancers Hub. Feel free to stop by. I will not promise that $40 cup of coffee and treat you for that, but we can get something else.
Sounds good. Thanks
Thank
so
you
much for
so
having
much.
me. Great to see you all again.
Take care. All right, so we're going to bring Mita back with our next guest, Joli Moniz. And I also did not mention, or I don't think any of us mentioned, if you do have any questions, feel free to write in the chat. We can try to answer many of them. We may not be able to answer some of them, depending on if we have the answer or not. But yeah, if you have any specific questions for our speakers or for us, feel free to write in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you, Joli. So I'm excited to bring up Joli. Joli, you able to join us?
Hello.
Hi, Joli. How are you?
I'm well now. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy to have your voice and your knowledge and the authenticity that you bring to this conversation as a Cabo Verdean local and somebody who's doing brilliant things with your business. Could you please do a proper introduction of you and your work so that people can learn a little bit more?
Sure. And before I start, I just am praying that the Wi-Fi behaves. I'm island hopping at the moment for work, and the Wi-Fi here has been a little bit unstable. So it'll be okay.
Don't worry. If anything happens, we'll bring back Lionel up. We'll bring back Jalen.
Okay.
We'll have a nice little talk. So don't worry about it. You're good.
Thank you. And then I'll jump back in. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I'm one of the many Cape Verdean Americans that Lionel referenced from, with roots from the islands of Bravo, Fogo, Santo Antão. And I was born in Providence, a big community of Cape Verdeans there, but I was raised in Connecticut and also spent many years in New York. And at the age of 15, my parents brought us to Cabo Verde for the first time. My dad had been, but that was the first trip for my sisters and I, and it was instant love. And I already was very familiar with my culture thanks to my parents, and it was heavy in the household. But I only had certain words and phrases of our language, Criollo, and of course, not growing up within the community or in the country itself. I always felt there was something missing. So I would seek it out anytime I could and said, one day I will do a sabbatical there, a summer there to learn more of the language. And after a few trips for just vacation purposes, I said, okay, this 2 weeks here and there is not enough. I have to just go. And so in 2012, I made that decision to move to Cabo Verde for just 1 year. And it's been 11 years now.
And you created an awesome business there as well.
And I created an awesome, thank you, a business within the first year, pretty organically. Once I had been in Praia, in the capital city, for several months, and I had friends and family visit, many actually. I was really lucky, but everyone thought, we got to take advantage while Joli's there for this 1 year. And one of those visitors, a young lady who went to my high school, Giselle, mentioned, she, by the way, is of Caribbean descent, not Cape Verdean descent, but she came twice in 2 months because she loved it so much. And she's the one who put the little bug in my ear that, you know, I clearly loved showing off the culture, the country, showing people around, giving them what I thought was, or think is, an authentic sense of the country, and that it could be a business. And I said, actually, that makes total sense. Tourism brings together everything I've ever done and loved. So here I am.
Awesome.
10 years of Avantati tours.
Yeah. Can you tell us like an overview of what your tour company provides, like some of the services, some of the tours that are like super popular?
Okay. Well, first, I would say that we focus mostly on personalized tourism. So I take time to get to know the clients, what their travel style is, the group dynamics, or the dynamics of a couple, or just that one person, what they're looking for, what they enjoy, their personality, et cetera. And then I personalize a trip for them. And I focus also on supporting local. So my teammates and I take time to go around. That's why I'm here in São Vicente, and I'll be going to Santo Antão. We take time to get to know locally owned businesses, restaurants, guides, drivers, hotels, and constantly check on them to vet things thoroughly before our clients get there. We also focus heavily on roots tourism. So encouraging other Cape Verdeans from the diaspora to come back home, whether it's just for a vacation or to retire, to come and do some service work, to invest here. Even if it's one trip, they're forever changed for the better, and it's good for the country. So we do tourism first and foremost. Sorry.
Yeah.
We also, over the years, started to offer other services that we felt our clients were looking for, such as dual citizenship services, you know, helping them become dual citizens, helping them find real estate, relocation services, helping them if they want to give back. You know, folks, a lot of people want to help the country of their origins, but they don't know where to start. They're concerned that the money might not go to the intended recipients, things like that. So we also have Cape Verde for Life, an organization to give back.
That's awesome. Out of all of it, because I've seen the website and you guys have a lot of different packages.
Yes.
And just to give context, for you know this, but maybe the audience doesn't know this. Out of all the islands, I chose to go to Santiago Island,
Yes.
where the capital city of Praia is located. And there's some debates around digital nomads as to which island is probably going to be the best one to base themselves at. Which island do you think is best for somebody who's going to be a remote worker staying there for a month plus, maybe a month to 6 months in Cabo Verde, and why?
Okay. I'd say there are 3 islands that are really poised for a successful digital nomad stay. And definitely first and foremost, Santiago, the main island, the island that has the capital city of Praia. It has an international airport, so it's easy to get in and out, whether you're coming from the States or Europe or the Caribbean, the continent of Africa. It's easy. It's a hub. It had fast Wi-Fi infrastructure, you know, nice streets, roads, so you can easily travel around the island. Lots of Airbnbs that are furnished, you know, and short-term rentals that are locally owned. A lot of locally owned businesses, especially in Santiago. And it just offers so much diversity. It's become a place for people from all the continents to meet for business conferences, things like that. So I think it's perfect, and it's where it all started. So lots of culture, lots of history. I always feel that whether you're coming to live for a little while and work digitally, or if you're coming just as a tourist, it's really where you should start because it sets the historical context. You know, this is where the country started in the 1400s. And this is the old city in Ribera Grande. That's where it all started, both Cabo Verde and actually the slave trade. It's a sad part of our history, but it is history nonetheless. It's, you know, where the Portuguese first set up camp and decided that they would start the West African, you know, triangular slave trade. So they would go and get the Africans from the mainland, the areas that are now Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Gambia, and they would bring them to Cabo Verde, and it was basically a breeding ground for the slave trade, a preparation. Oh, I'm breaking up. They would give the enslaved Africans, you know, Christian names, baptize them, try to break their spirits, divide up, you know, the different ethnic groups and languages, and prepare them to go off to Brazil or to the Americas, the Caribbean. So it's, again, unfortunate and really tragic part of our history, but it is history. It's a huge part of African history, American history, world history, and one that's little known. So I think it's a good place to start. I would also say San Vicente, where I am now, it's very urban. It also has an international airport, considered pretty sophisticated. Actually, you might think you're, you know, in the Caribbean, in Europe. It's a beautiful African city, and lots of apartments, easy to get around. A lot of people do speak English because the British ran the port for about 80 years. The third island I would say perhaps is Sal, again, because it has an international airport, it has the infrastructure, things to do, activities when you're not working, strong Wi-Fi. However, having said that, the first two islands, Santiago and San Vicente, you'll get more of the Cape Verdean culture and spirit. So I would suggest those personally.
And if for somebody who goes to Praia, which I would personally recommend, because I think, as you've mentioned, it has the historical impact, the infrastructure, the international airport. It's very sort of cohesive, I think, as an experience to get like a 360 understanding of Cabo Verde. Out of all of the specific tours that you guys offer, if somebody had to pick one specific tour from your tour company that you would be so proud for them to experience and say, okay, I spent a month in Cabo Verde, I reached out to Joli, this was the tour that we picked, this was amazing, which would it be and why?
I'm sorry, I have to cheat. I cannot just say one.
Oh,
Can I just
come
say
on.
3? I know. All right.
Well, we do have a time limit, so we do need to have one. Yeah.
One that is a little bit more recent for us, I created about 2 years ago, is our street art, street tour, street art, street food mashup tour. And people love it. And I love it because it allows you to go through different neighborhoods in Praia, and not just the routes that tourists typically see, not just the, you know, more organized or modern or new and beautiful streets, but all the hoods and beautiful street art, vibrant neighborhoods. You get to interact with locals because Cape Verdeans are just so welcoming. I'm sure like someone's going to invite you into their home. I remember one group was invited into a nice lady's house, and they ended up having a little dance party in her living room. So it allows you again to see beautiful art, interact with people, see different neighborhoods, different walks of life, and learn about culture, traditions like tabanca and things like that.
Yeah.
So I love that one. And eat. And then if you're a foodie, you enjoy part 2. And you might have a few beverages along the way at each stop.
Okay, so
it kind of it brings together a lot of things.
So I love asking people this question. It's a Sunday in Cabo Verde. You're invited to dinner and grandma's cooking, and it's a traditional Cabo Verde meal. What is that meal going to be?
Oh, it depends on the time of year, but for sure the meal will have some kind of maize, corn. It might be cachupa, but because it's Sunday, it's probably cachupa refogado. So like refried cachupa. Cachupa is our national dish. Lionel mentioned it. It's our stew. Very African. Has, again, the corn, the dried maize, beans, different meats. If it's cachupa rica, rich cachupa, maybe tuna, vegetables, and it's filling. So you're good for the rest of the day.
That sounds awesome. So the neighborhood that I stayed in Praia, and I don't want to pronounce it, it's can you pronounce it for me? I don't want to pronounce it.
Palmarejo.
Palmarejo.
Nice.
I love the convenience of that neighborhood. And to be quite honest, as I told you when I was there, I was going to the beach and around the beach pretty often. And it's a great experience as a digital nomad to be at this beautiful tropical beach, go back to your Airbnb, do some work, get in the culture. But there's more to being a digital nomad than that. And especially in the context of this conversation, is responsibility. So I'm just curious, as somebody who works in travel and is active in the travel community, and you're seeing a lot of digital nomads come there, what would be some of the things that you would advise to nomads that are coming to Cabo Verde on how they can responsibly integrate and travel there as a nomad?
Some of the things were mentioned before, probably all, but definitely if you can learn just a few words and phrases, it goes a long way. Cape Verdeans will appreciate that you made the effort, hang out at locally owned places or places that tend to attract locals, especially, we have a tradition around having coffee in the morning and sitting and chatting and making friends with people who are from there. Cape Verdeans are very welcoming, again, open. If you just smile, it goes a long way. Learn some of the ways, the traditions. Like in the States, this doesn't typically happen, but in Cabo Verde, you walk into a restaurant, you walk into a lounge, you should look left and right and greet everyone. Bon dia, boa tarde. Smile. If you know someone even a little bit, stop. Don't just wave, but stop. Ask them how they're doing, how their family. Like these niceties that kind of were forgotten in a lot of the world definitely still remain in Cabo Verde. I would say volunteer if you can, if you have a little time. There are lots of organizations that could use help, and not just, financial assistance, but you being present and giving of your time, giving of skills if you have them. Definitely, again, I can't stress enough supporting local. I know I said it, but I'll say it again. Take time to find out which hotels are owned by Cape Verdeans, which restaurants are owned, and we own many things. If you can avoid the all-inclusive resorts, please do. Most of the money leaves the country as quickly as it comes in. So venture out. Venture out. That's it, I would say.
Yeah, and you actually mentioned something at the start of our conversation about the charities that is such an issue that's happening when traveler nomads want to donate to a particular charity, but they're not sure if the finances are being streamed through the proper channels. And we have the rare treat of having you join us, and you're directly involved with a charity. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the Cabo Verde charity you're involved with and how people can get involved.
Okay, so thank you. Again, it's called Cape Verde for Life, and I also started that the first year I moved. Believe in always giving back, especially to a place that gives so much. So Cape Verde for Life initially was intended to help young boys and their families, because I saw a lot of boys struggling and losing their way and getting called by street life. But now we're more of a middle man, I guess. Helping to make sure that anyone who wants to donate, that their funds are going to other on the ground organizations, such as like Casa Amizade, or there's an organization in Fonte Lima in Santiago for the development of Fonte Lima, organizations like that. So we vet them first. We make sure that they are really contributing what they say they are, that then it's not going into pockets. And that they're doing the hands-on work. And then we show receipts. We take pictures. We show proof of the money's going to, where they want them to. We take time also to find out, like, say you want to donate, but you don't know how. Okay. But you also have a special, like a soft spot for women who have been abused, or children, education. So we also can figure out the best organizations to help you, meet those needs. Or we do a lot of the work ourselves. We do things like, school backpacks, funds. We do pro bono English lessons. Lately, we've been gifting kids who have who need glasses, gifting them with the prescription glasses, the consultation to the doctors, bringing them. All of those things may seem small, but once a kid can see clearly in class, the confidence, the academic success, the self-esteem, everything goes up. So that's been one that we really take pleasure in.
Wow,
So far we've gifted several kids, but we want to do more of that going forward.
what a beautiful mission. I'm
you.
so glad to learn more and have an opportunity to amplify what you're doing. It's really
Thank
outstanding. And for anybody who's tuning in, definitely hit up Joli and her tour company to learn more about their tours and their charity involvement. Before we wrap, I wanted to do some quick fire questions, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, we kind of already covered one. So we know the graffiti tour is something that you really think that would be an impactful experience in terms of like the tourism, the fun stuff to do. Street food. Okay. What are 3 things that almost every Cabo Verdean household will have that are uniquely Cabo Verdean? You go in there, you see it, you're like, okay, someone from Cabo Verde definitely lives in this house.
Conta de hoje, or ceviche, depends on, what island you're from, what you call it. But this is like our evil eye. Wards off negative energy, protects you. You see this on someone, they're of Cape Verdean descent. Grogu, our sugarcane rum. That's been made for hundreds of years. Yes. What else? Maize, maybe we call it samp in the States. So the dried maize in bags that we use just for cachupa. I would say that as well. And it's a Cape Verdean household.
I would have never known any of those 3 things. So that is super helpful information. Very insightful. When I was in Cabo Verde, I was primarily getting around through taxis. What do you think is the best way for somebody to get around? Let's say if they're in Praia.
Taxis, I would say for sure. They're everywhere. They're usually honest. They have flat fees, like certain rates per, depending on if you're staying in the same neighborhood or going to the next one. Very fairly priced, I would say. Taxis are great. If you want to rent a car, just so you have a little more flexibility, 3 a.m, leaving a club or going into the countryside, that's always easy as well. Tons of rental car companies.
Yeah. And speaking of going to the club, because there is awesome entertainment and music.
Yes.
So much amazing dancers. Everybody can rhythm. Music is great. Who are some Cabo Verdean musicians that you think folks should go and search on Spotify and learn about? Like, what are 1 or 2 that you would say?
For sure. And yes, we're all about music. I would say Myra Andrade.
Yes,
for sure. And she's become quite popular in the world music scene as well. And samples, plays around with different genres. So she's really creative. I would say they're of Cape Verdean distant, but from Guinea-Bissau, it's Tabanca Jazz, my favorite Cape Verdean band for sure. Tito Parish, he's from South Vicente Island, brilliant music. Sara Tavares.
I think Maya's music is definitely crossing over to American mainstream.
It is.
Little by little.
Yeah.
A lot of the content that we've been sharing from Eventually on this event has actually been using some of her music. So, and you put me onto her first when I visited.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I'm very proud.
2 last questions.
Brilliant. Okay.
2 last questions. So, there are tons of beaches. I mean, you guys are various islands. What is the most beautiful beach you've ever been to in Cabo Verde out of all the islands? Your favorite beach?
I would say maybe Santa Monica in Boa Vista. Back when it was empty, not one resort, nothing, miles and miles of untouched beach. But I think, are building one now. So I would say Santa Maria because it's same beautiful turquoise water, like the color, incredible, but also nice colors in the backdrop, like the houses, the resorts along the beach, beautiful.
Awesome. And my last question, I know there must be so many different layers and complexities to this one, but what are you personally the most proud of as a Cabo Verdean?
Ooh. I would say our morabeza, our kindness, our hospitality, the warmth with which we welcome people. And that is cultural. You see it not just here in Cabo Verde, you see it in the diaspora. Europe and in the US. It's just something something unique, I think, with our culture. It's probably other cultures as well, but ours feels different to me.
You know what? That was something that I commented on to people when they were like, well, what did you
Okay.
notice? I was like, people are very warm here.
Yeah. Extremely affectionate.
Very
Extremely.
affectionate.
It's not just the women, it's not just the kids, it's the men. We're very just full of love and amorous people, for better or worse.
Yeah, and just like a little anecdote. When I was
Okay.
waiting to get checked, I flew into Praia from Lisbon, and when I was waiting on the check-in line, some of my bags were just kind of like slipping down my shoulder, and then some woman on the line just walked up to me and she was like, "Here, let me fix this." Like, you know, they just jump in and like are just
Yes. Like if you were in a public van going to the other side of an island, it's very typical to have a woman just hand you her baby. Here, like hold her for a second while they're like rummaging their purse. Just really trusting it, maybe a little too much so, but just it's a beautiful thing at the essence, at the core.
It is
Open, trusting, loving people.
Loving, beautiful people, wonderful culture, great food. Joli, thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Thank you for having me.
No. And can you just share like the best website and social media handles that people can get in touch with you and learn more about your services?
For sure. So the website has links to all of them. It's Avantade. Avantade means to feel at home, feel welcome. AVONTADE-tours.com.
Awesome. And on Instagram?
Instagram, Facebook, everywhere.
Okay,
for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Joli. Have a wonderful
Avantade
day.
Tours Instagram. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So we're going to bring back Jalen. Well, we brought back Joli, but we are going to be bringing back Jalen.
Sorry.
Yes. So Jalen, thanks for joining us, for partnering with us again to have this conversation. Do you want to close it out from Freelancers Union?
Sure, why not? And thank you for pretty much organizing such wonderful guests. We love doing these events and just learning a little bit about another country and just learning about the digital nomad experience as well. We hope all our members appreciate everything you do with us. But yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite series that we do here. So
thank you.
All right, but thank you so much, Mita. I'm going to let people know, follow us both Eventually and Freelancers Union. Check out our website, follow our wonderful guests here today that have spoken with us, sign up for our newsletters. We will be back next month. We are scheduled, hopefully if all of our speakers can be available for the date we're thinking of, but we will be going to Medellin, Colombia. So we'll be wrapping up the year, or this year's series, with that. Definitely give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and if you'd like to comment below where you'd like us to visit next, for maybe we can plan for next year, let us know in the comments below, and definitely check out all the links in the description. But thank you so much, everyone, for taking time of your day to do this wonderful event, and we hope to see you next time. Take care, everyone.